All right. Hey, everybody. Sorry about the hold up. Madison Elliott, Substance Use Specialist, Talbot County Public Schools. Here is Beth Williams.
Hi, everybody.
And we are presenting on part 2 of Stimulants. As usual, Q&A will be at the end. Feel free to type in the chat or Q&A at the bottom of the page for any questions you have. Also, if you think of any ideas for later in the future for fall webinars or for like next month, any topics you're interested in learning about, feel free to email me. And we'll definitely work together to get on that. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to get started. Is this good, Beth? This looks good.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Let's make it
Get the schedule thing because I'm going to talk a little bit, just kind of what that means since we're getting into more illicit drugs right now. Yeah, good.
All right.
Good.
1 second, everybody. Share screen. And then this up. And then okay.
Awesome. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Hi again, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm glad to be back again with you, and appreciate you all being here this afternoon. Last time we talked about prescription stimulants, and so today we're going to kind of transition over into stimulant drugs in general. So everything that's in the stimulant drug category of drugs of abuse. So we talked amphetamines last time, so we'll talk a little bit more about that today. Methamphetamine and ice, ecstasy, cocaine and crack, and then khat. And then we'll talk a little bit at the end about what parents and concerned adults can do. Okay, so, how drugs are scheduled. Before we get into any of this, I wanted to just give you a review of how drugs are scheduled. And the DEA and the government has a way of kind of categorizing drugs based on if they have any medical use, accepted medical use, and what level of potential for abuse that they have. So in other words, if you're a Schedule I drug, those are drugs that are chemicals or substances that have no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. So you'll see some examples there: marijuana, ecstasy, heroin, LSD, and peyote. Most of those, ecstasy, LSD, peyote are psychedelic type of drugs as well. We all know about heroin and marijuana. Even though there are medical marijuana clinics, there really are not any generally accepted medical practice to prescribe marijuana. It can be used, experimentally, but right now it is not has not been removed from Schedule I. Schedule II drugs are those with a high potential for abuse, with their use potentially leading to severe dependence, and they're considered dangerous as well. So like methamphetamine, cocaine, we'll be talking about those today. Fentanyl, Vicodin, oxycodone, and Adderall. And then Schedule III drugs are moderate to low potential for dependence. So things like steroids, ketamine. And then Schedule IV are drugs with a low potential for abuse and a low risk of dependence. So these are some of your antidepressant drugs, some of your, just used to treat mental illness and those type of things. And then Schedule V are those with very low potential for abuse and might be something that has tiny quantities of narcotics. So for example, cough suppressants sometimes have a little bit of codeine in them. So that would be a Schedule V drug. And I'm bringing this up today for a couple of reasons. This is how the DEA categorizes drugs. So when somebody is illegally dealing or using a drug, this is how the DEA and the government assess penalty, but also just to look at how certain things are such a high risk for dependence. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today. Okay, so stimulants are a family of drugs that increase activity or speed up the body's central nervous system. So most of us probably use a stimulant every day. If we drink coffee in the morning or even a little bit of tea, they have caffeine in it. Tobacco is also a commonly used stimulant. Obviously, these are, ones that are not going to be they're more socially acceptable and more safe if they're used kind of, in a moderate way. Tobacco, I guess we could argue that, but basically they are not considered drugs of abuse. Prescription stimulants are medications that are used to treat ADHD, narcolepsy, Parkinson's, or for weight loss. And we talked about this last time, that they're prescribed to increase alertness, concentration, and attention regarding learning by increasing levels of dopamine in the brain. And so these medications, though, even though they may be prescribed, they are amphetamine type stimulants. They're in the same general classification as other stimulant drugs. So there is a risk for abuse, and they can be sold illegally or diverted into the illegal drug market. So basically, stimulant drugs and effects, we talked a lot about this last time, but it's the same for any stimulant. The adolescent brain is continuing to develop and mature until the age of about 25. Stimulants change the brain structure, particularly the functioning of the limbic system, which is where the pleasure center of the brain is. It controls our feelings of pleasure or well-being or happiness, and dopamine production. And so with a regular pattern of misuse, the production of dopamine in our brains slows down and is replaced by the drug, the presence of the drug. So when there's less dopamine, the brain begins to need the drug more to be able to experience pleasure. And survival depends on obtaining and using the drug. And the drug takes priority over critical survival needs. And that's kind of the cornerstone of addiction. So what are amphetamines? Well, amphetamines are psychostimulant drugs. So they speed up the messages traveling between the brain and the body and the central nervous system. They are classified as Schedule II, meaning they have a high potential for abuse and currently acceptable medical use in FDA approved products that are prescribed. Some types of amphetamines, such as methamphetamine or speed, are produced and sold illegally. They have absolutely no medical use at all. Back in the day, there were some amphetamines or even methamphetamine that was used experimentally way back, in the early part of the 1900s. But they are considered illegal and illicit substances now. And the most potent form of any stimulant is crystal methamphetamine or ice. So characteristics of amphetamines are they are pills, tablets, or capsules, or a powder. They can vary in size and color. They can range in color, powdered when they're powdered from white through to brown, sometimes gray or pink. They have a strong smell, a bitter taste, and can be packaged in foil packets, plastic bags, or even small balloons when they're sold on the street. Slang names for amphetamine is speed, uppers, Louis, gooey, whiz, rack, bennies, black beauties, and they're administered by swallowing, injected, or smoked or snorted. So here you're going to see on the top left is amphetamine. You're going to see pills. Again, it may be pills that are legally prescribed but are sold illicitly, or it may be what we call counterfeit or look-alike pills that are created with some of the components of amphetamines and then other kind of things thrown in, and we'll go through that process a little later. So sometimes people use the pills, sometimes they crush the pills and dilute them in water, dilute the powder in water so they can inject, or sometimes they will snort or inhale amphetamine. We've been hearing a lot lately about counterfeit pills. And so this is really becoming a problem, not just with stimulants, but with pretty much all medications and pills across the board. Illicit amphetamines and illegally manufactured counterfeit pills could be a mix of a drug. Many of them now are including fentanyl, binding agents, caffeine, sugar, and they're very easily obtained online. So counterfeit pills are illegally manufactured to look the same as a legitimate medication, legitimate. So somebody may think they're buying Adderall, and it might be something that is, a lookalike or a counterfeit pill made to look like Adderall. So somebody may think they're buying Adderall because they want to misuse Adderall, and it's really not that. Illicit amphetamines or other designer drugs are created to be similar to illegal drugs, but without the exact structure, so they can avoid legal penalties.
Also, if you guys are aware of this or not, I'm not sure, but kids on Snapchat, there's a lot of counterfeit pills being sold on Snapchat that kids are thinking they're getting the real whatever they're trying to get, and it has fentanyl in it or whatever else, and it's killing kids. It's happening all over the country right now, so everyone to be like super aware of that. Definitely try to monitor your kids' Snapchat if you can.
Absolutely. And it's very scary because they're being made again by, kind of street chemists that are trying to mimic or copy a formula so it will look like an official pill. So effects of amphetamines on the body is obviously it's it's a stimulant. So with all the stimulants we look at today, there's always basically the same effects, increased blood pressure and pulse, which increases the risk for stroke or heart problems, insomnia, loss of weight or appetite or physical exhaustion, and continued use can lead to anxiety and paranoia, restlessness, not being able to sleep, dry mouth, regular colds and flu, especially if somebody is snorting or inhaling or smoking a substance, you're going to get a lot of respiratory issues. Tolerance and dependence, which we know is part of an addiction. Dental problems, financial work and social problems, and depression, which is kind of a rebound effect. So if somebody is taking stimulants and then they stop for a while, they can rebound down into depression. So it's kind of like this back and forth between a very stimulated state and a depressed state. Okay, so methamphetamine. I don't know how many people we have that have watched Breaking Bad, but that is a really good lesson on methamphetamine and what it does to people and how it's made. Methamphetamine is a very powerful and highly addictive Schedule I substance. Much of it is manufactured in Mexico and comes across the border. Manufacturing process involves many easily obtained chemicals that are hazardous, many of them. Pseudoephedrine is one of them. Iodine, various acids, acetone, ammonia, ether, anything basically that they can get to fill in that formula for methamphetamine. Now, if they can't get one of these, substances, they may substitute other things. And as you might have seen on Breaking Bad, some of this can be really, really good methamphetamine, very pure. Other of it can be very cloudy. So, it all depends on what the mixture is, what the recipe is. But pseudoephedrine is what's found in common substances like Sudafed or, allergy or cold type medications. And the government a few years ago put limits on how much somebody can buy of those medications. So if you go to your pharmacy to buy Sudafed, you can only buy so much. So the folks that make this will go and kind of do scattered buys throughout. So they might go to 5 different grocery stores and buy the limit that they can get in each store. So they have enough to create methamphetamine. Upon use, it immediately causes a euphoric reaction and affects the central nervous system. It looks like crystals or rocks. It can be a powder. Recently, there's a pill form out there that looks like ecstasy and also may contain fentanyl. And we'll talk about ecstasy a little bit later, but that again is a, completely manufactured drug that is being used quite frequently and can be purchased on the internet as well. Slang names are meth, speed, blue, crank, crystal or crystal meth. Sometimes it's called MDMA, which is just an abbreviation for methamphetamine. And how it's administered: smoking, snorting, injecting, or swallowed. So here's some examples. You'll see the blue in the upper left corner. On the bottom are some just white crystals. It's typically sold in a very small bag. On the right, you can see someone getting ready, obviously, to inject. So they're crushing the crystals into a fine powder. They're going to dilute it, cook it over a flame with the spoon, and then inject it. Extremely powerful drug. You can see more crystals here on the left, and on the bottom is a methamphetamine pipe where one of the tiny crystals would be put into the pipe. And actually, it's not really lit on fire, but it's kind of vaporized, where they will heat the bottom of the pipe, and it will cause like a vapor that they can inhale. So effects of methamphetamine, again, this is a really awful drug. Anything from paranoia, confusion. What we typically see is people that have a lot of, sores, a lot of scratching, very bad teeth. They may have lowered immunity, so they are getting other illnesses that are out there, paranoia, confusion. And the total methamphetamine has made it really one of the most dangerous drugs on the American market. So ice is the same as methamphetamine chemically, but instead of a powder, it is produced in a crystal form that is stronger. So typically methamphetamine, if somebody is buying it, they will say they get it in a powder because they want to inject or snort it. But if they get a crystal form, they may either crush it or they may go ahead and smoke the crystal. And that's what we call ice. So it's basically the same not mechanism, but the same makeup, but a different mechanism of use. And ice, just like we'll see later with crack cocaine, it's the person doesn't have to go through a lot of extra steps to get it. It's like a little, in fact, I call it ready rock when it's cocaine. It's ready to smoke, ready to use, so more convenient for the end user. The average purity these days is up to 80%, which in 2011, it was 10% pure methamphetamine. So, like everything else, the purity and the just the strength of these drugs is increasingly going up. So characteristics of ice: it looks like a crystal like rock or a chunk like we saw in the photos. It's called crystal meth, habu or tina or tea, administered by smoking, injected or swallowed, but mostly with ice we see people that are smoking it. Goes immediately to the brain. There's an immediate euphoric reaction to methamphetamine and ice. So common effects include, again, just like methamphetamine, the insomnia, the dental problems, dehydration, mental health problems, injuries and infections, and heart palpitations. People typically experience a crash when they're coming down, where they feel very physically drained because they are at such high energy. And there's also with methamphetamine and with cocaine, there is a lot of sexual experiences that come along with that. People oftentimes use these drugs to get very stimulated, and they say that it helps them have better sexual experiences. More serious health problems could be, just like with any stimulant, high blood pressure, heart attacks, and stroke. Okay. So we're shifting now from the amphetamine family. We're going to go into ecstasy, and ecstasy is kind of known as a party drug. It was being used at raves, which were these huge parties that would be outdoors, that would have just, thousands of people would go to these, and there would be music and dancing and all of that. So it is a synthetic psychoactive drug, chemically similar to methamphetamine, but also to a hallucinogen called mescaline. Mescaline actually comes from a cactus, and they take the top of the cactus off and dry it and smoke it or eat it. So it's kind of a combination of a stimulant drug that gives you a lot of energy and a hallucinogenic drug, which you are seeing and hearing and feeling things that necessarily are not there or that are exaggerated. So as you can imagine, it's a Schedule I drug. It produces an energizing effect as well as distortion in time and perception, and enhanced enjoyment or pleasure from experiences. So people would go to these raves or these dances, or even nightclubs or concerts, and basically it would be like, I don't even know how you would explain it, just people having lots of sexual encounters, feeling like they're experiencing a very euphoric kind of vision or experience. So my husband was actually a firefighter and a paramedic in Baltimore City, and they had to respond to a rave where people were there, and there were people walking around with no clothes on. There were people just, it was unbelievable. He couldn't even fathom that something like that could happen. And but what happens is that people, well, we'll talk about that in a little bit about what happens at some of these raves. But the appearance of ecstasy could be a tablet, a capsule, or powder. There are brand names that are used by the different traffickers. So they use different colors or logos as marketing tools and to distinguish their product. So the logos could be produced, again, with like a little pill mold or, tools that people can use to press substances into pills. But they're sometimes can coincide with a holiday or special event, and they might have butterflies or four-leaf clovers. Common or street names, again, MDMA. You can see a lot of those. Candy, because it looks like candy. Hug drug or love drug. We commonly hear about it called Molly. Administered, ingested by mouth. Powder, snorted or taken as a liquid. We rarely see this injected. So here are some examples of Molly, and you can see that there are, cute little things. There's butterflies and doves, and I think this one over here is a four-leaf clover. This is what it looks like. And so people that go to these large events and want to buy Molly, it looks very appealing. And for a while, I think it feels very appealing to them because it just calms them down. Everybody's hugging, and it's like a big, love fest, like they said. So here are the effects. It immediately releases serotonin. So that produces a high that lasts 3 to 6 hours. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter, just as dopamine is, and it plays a role in regulating our mood and memory, as well as aggression, sexual activity, and sensitivity to pain. So stimulant effects of ecstasy include an enhanced sense of pleasure, self-confidence, and energy. And psychedelic effects include feelings of peacefulness, acceptance, and empathy. So short-term health effects could be nausea, muscle cramping, involuntary teeth clenching, and many times at the events you'll see people with pacifiers because that helps them from clenching their teeth very hard when they're under the influence of this. Then that's the stimulant effect coming in, where people get very amped up and uptight and very often clench or grind their teeth. Blurred vision, chills, and sweating, hypothermia, or dehydration. And at some of these raves, they will go for hours without drinking anything, and then they will have kidney failure, acute kidney failure. And that's why sometimes they would, I don't think these happen as often anymore, but they would call EMS people to come, and these young people would just be absolutely dehydrated. And some of the raves, the people running the rave would have water, but they would make people buy the water. So, this is kind of the type of folks that we're looking at that are distributing this kind of stuff. Long-term effects of ecstasy, because its use promotes trust, closeness, empathy, it enhances sexual desire. So the risk of unsafe sex practices, resulting in HIV/AIDS, other sexually transmitted infections, hepatitis, is very high. Damage to the serotonin in the brain, the neurons can affect their ability to communicate with other areas of the brain. So again, we know serotonin, when we're healthy and we're functioning and our brain is healthy, it plays a role in regulating our mood and memory, sleep, and appetite. So I think this is the one that has a question mark in the top corner, because they have, there's mixed research on whether or not ecstasy is a addictive drug. What is that potential for abuse or addiction? And there's been mixed reviews from research, but some research has shown that 60% of people who use ecstasy do report withdrawal symptoms. And withdrawal, as we know, is one of the true signs that someone is physically dependent or addicted. And research has also shown that lab animals will self-administer ecstasy or MDMA, showing that, the animals prefer that to food or water or sleep. And that actually has been true with studies on cocaine as well, that the animals will prefer that over anything else in their life. Okay, so after moderate use of ecstasy, irritable, depression, aggression and impulsiveness, muscle cramps, kind of the same types of things that we're seeing, anxiety, decreased appetite, and loss of interest in sex, or really loss of interest or being able to have to concentrate or pay attention to anything. So again, that's kind of that rebound effect coming down off of that, very intense feeling of well-being and pleasure. Okay. So now we're going to switch over to cocaine. Cocaine, believe it or not, is the second most commonly used illegal drug after marijuana. It's the fourth most commonly used illicit drug, coming in after prescription painkillers and tranquilizers. So it's a Schedule II drug with a very high potential for abuse and addiction. So this photo shows us some bright green leaves from the coca plant, which is found in South America. And cocaine comes from the coca plant. It's processed and refined from the leaves of that plant. And in their natural organic state, the coca leaves are a mild stimulant similar to coffee. And in fact, that people who are farmers in some areas of South America chew the leaves as a stimulant, just like we drink coffee. So the coca leaves, it's only after they go through a process that involves a lot of different chemicals at different stages of this process that it will become what we see as powdered cocaine. Now, I did include, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, some of the chemicals that are used in processing of these drugs, not because, anybody really wants to know to replicate these, but because just to see kind of what goes into these drugs when they're processed. So we're not just putting, somebody's not just putting cocaine in their body. They're putting cocaine with all this other stuff that it's been cooked down in and dried and stirred up and cooked again. And, they're using gasoline, they're using ether, they're using ammonia or other chemicals. So, the people that are producing these drugs and selling these drugs are not nice people that just want other people to have a good time. I mean, these are people who are in this for the money. And that's it. They really don't care about, what happens to people once they've sold them that drug. So characteristics of cocaine, and I would think most of us are probably more knowledgeable about cocaine because it's been around for a while. In the 80s, it was very big. It was on the party scene. It was, really quite a popular drug. It's an off-white or white, gray, or pinkish powder. It's diluted or cut with adulterants to change or intensify its effects, or to allow dealers to increase the street value by selling, a powdered substance with less pure cocaine and more of all the other stuff that's in it. So the cutting agents can change the texture, form, color of the drug and make it easier to smoke, snort, or inject. So cocaine has a couple of different appearances or uses or, forms, I should say. So slang terms: blow, bump, see, dust, flake, line, nose candy, snow, we hear a lot. Speedball, we hear a lot. And oftentimes speedball is when somebody is using cocaine and heroin at the same time. So they're getting, two conflicting effects on their nervous system and on their heart and lungs, which is, you have a stimulant like cocaine, which is very strong, and then to try to use heroin as well with that, which is a depressant. Although many times people that use cocaine, they will use depressant drugs just to be able to come down from the intensity of the drug, because it causes a lot of agitation and stimulation. So oftentimes people will even drink alcohol while they're using cocaine. It is snorted, dissolved in water, and injected or smoked. And when it is in the form to be smoked, it's called freebase or crack. So some of the adulterants, or the things that they cut cocaine with, is things like laundry detergent, laxatives, caffeine, powders, anything powder like baby powder, cornstarch, flour, sugar. Sometimes people can get their hands on something like Procaine or Novocaine, which is used like by the dentist, or Sometimes they use creatine, which is sold over the counter at pretty much any exercise nutrition store. Or often cocaine is also mixed with drugs like fentanyl. We've seen that a few times in our county where people have thought they had overdosed and were administered, the people who responded wanted to administer Narcan, and the people who were with the person that overdosed said, well, we didn't do narcotics, we didn't do heroin, all we did was cocaine. But, you know, like anything else out there right now, fentanyl is being found in cocaine. Let's see, many of these additives, you know, they look like cocaine. It's a white powder. And they can, you know, be easily cut in with the cocaine. So people that are buying it think they're getting a really pure white cocaine, when really it could be a lot of these additives. So, and also some of them can lead to overdose or poisoning deaths. So if people think, you know, people may have allergies to some of these things, like for instance, laundry detergent. If you cut that in with cocaine and then you're snorting that, it's not going to break down in your body. It's going to build up and cause blockages in your heart, brain, or liver. So that many times the adulterants or the cutting agents are just as dangerous as the actual drug itself to an individual. Cocaine is readily absorbed across the mucous membranes, like the linings of the nose and mouth. And that's why people, you know, you see on TV, a lot of times people are testing it to see if it's good, and they might rub it on their gums or, you know, snort it up their nose. When ingested, it causes euphoria, very, very intense euphoria, and a boost in self-confidence, vigilance, you know, self-awareness and well-being. Obviously, with any other stimulant, cocaine increases blood pressure and heart rate and can lead to heart attack or stroke even after one use, depending on the purity of it. More effects are when people use over a long time, intense craving for the drug. Cocaine is one of those drugs that the cravings become overwhelming when people can't get it. You know, irritable, restless, increased alertness, violent outbursts, you know, kind of the same as we've been seeing with any of the stimulants, but cocaine, sometimes the effects are really magnified. You have a lot of cardiac issues, seizures or strokes. A lot of times people have psychotic episodes or very paranoia, you know, full of paranoia, full of suspicion, sexual dysfunction, which is kind of a rebound effect because a lot of times people say cocaine, again, enhances their sexual experiences. So, you know, when you don't have it or you've had it for too long that it's burning out your system, people get that rebound effect. Okay. So here's what it looks like. On the top is a little baggie, as you can see, with some white powder. To the left on the bottom, people use both photos on the bottom. People will use a razor blade to cut down the powder into as fine as they can get it, so that they can then snort it. And this is kind of a, you know, typical thing you see on TV: somebody rolling up $100 bill to snort cocaine. What parents can look for might be something like razor blades, rolled up money or straws in a child's room, mirrors, because it's oftentimes cut on a mirror so people can see and get every bit of it. It's considered very valuable to people that use it, so they want to get every last little grain of it. So that's kind of what I think parents can look for. Some of these tools or works to use cocaine. Okay, so crack cocaine. Crack and cocaine, again, are the same thing. It's the same substance, but crack is considered free-base cocaine. And that is when the cocaine is more, I don't know what the word is, you know, cut down and made into a harder substance. And we'll show you some pictures. It'll be easier to explain. But basically, freebase is something people have been doing for years with cocaine, and it allows you to smoke it. But it is made in the last probably 20 to 25 years, crack cocaine has come along, and it is like the quick and easy, convenient way to use cocaine because it's already in the smokable rock form. Crack cocaine, pretty much with anything that you are going to smoke, is even more potent, addictive, and dangerous than cocaine powder. There have been people that have used crack one time who have become addictive. It is that strong. It immediately hits the bloodstream and right to the brain. There are problems with crack pipes because they burn very hot and they can damage people's mouths, or ether. The ether that is used to create crack can cause burns in someone's throat or nasal passages. Okay, so here's what crack looks like. Just a quick explanation, it's made by, they dissolve the raw cocaine, the powder, into solutions of ether or baking soda, ammonia, water, whatever else they can find, I suppose, and heating it until the cocaine gets like a pasty or oily substance to it. And then it's cooled off and made into little rocks like that, little pebbles. Additives, again, powdered milk, sugar, baking soda, maybe added to make it even cheaper. So again, it makes you a bigger supply that you can sell as crack cocaine. Again, it was created to make an affordable and convenient version of cocaine. So people that preferred to freebase cocaine, they could now just buy crack and it'd be ready to use. Initially, urban areas and low-income areas with low-income individuals who may have been more vulnerable to drug abuse and addiction were targeted. And as we know, in many of the cities now, crack has really taken over with some of those lower income areas because it's very, very cheap. So characteristics of crack cocaine: white or off-white rock or pebbles, packaged in very small baggies when sold. It's known as crack because of the crackling sound that it makes when it's heated and smoked. Some of the slang terms, it could be any of these, could be interchangeable with slang terms for cocaine, but one specific to crack could be like base, bazooka, blowout bomb, devil smoke, moon rock, freebase, ready rock. We hear ready rock a lot. Rocks. It is smoked in a crack pipe, and that is what this looks like. So you're going to get this one on the left is very similar to a meth ice pipe, methamphetamine. The one in the middle here is kind of a fancier version. And then there's a glass pipe on the right. So any of these could be used to smoke the rock, and the flame is just, and these two on the right with the flame would just be touched right to the rock and it would vaporize it. Okay, so again, things for parents to be aware of or look for. I don't know why that's on the top there, but okay. I think the last one we're going to be talking about today, the last stimulant, is khat. And khat is a flowering plant. It's native to East and West Ethiopia. Again, it's used for stimulant and euphoric effects, and traditionally in some areas for medicinal purposes, as well as recreation. It's a plant, so it's going to look like leafy pieces of leaves, or leaves on a stem. Slang terms: khat or quat, cat, chat, quad. How administered: the buds and the leaves of the khat plant are chewed, very similar to how the native populations in South America may chew the coca leaves for a euphoric effect. People will choose khat. Now they will get more of that effect with khat than they will with the coca leaves. I'm not sure how much we've seen khat in this area, but we have heard people mention it. So that's why I thought I would put it in here. I don't think it's one of the most popularly used because it's probably difficult to get, but it is definitely a stimulant that people have awareness of around here. So the short-term effects could include, like any stimulant, increased talkativeness, excitement, euphoria, more of like a feeling good stimulated effect rather than an agitated, aggressive, stimulated effect that you might sometimes get with cocaine or crack. So people might feel really energetic, very social, very alert. They're feeling they can concentrate better. Again, it's going to raise temperature and blood pressure because it is a stimulant, and it is going to cause a more rapid heartbeat and breathing, and reduce appetite, which is pretty much what all stimulants do. So regular use could cause worsening of existing mental health problems, sleep-related issues, liver disease, fertility problems, which actually can occur in a lot of these other stimulants too, especially cocaine, digestive problems, sore mouth because you're chewing, mouth cancer could be, or ulcers in the mouth because you're chewing a raw substance. It's probably at a low risk for dependence, but withdrawal symptoms are possible if someone stops using it after they've used it on a regular basis. And that again could be, we're looking at that rebound effect with the stimulants, where it could be mild depression, low blood pressure, or tiredness. And this is what it looks like. Again, kind of unusual, but if I were a parent and I saw something like this in my child's room, I would be a little curious, more than a little curious. But you can see on the upper left is how it looks when it's picked off the plant. In the middle, you can see the leaves are kind of dried. On the right, this was something that was interpreted and by DEA on the border. And again, I'm imagining it's probably coming up the southern border or maybe over through the islands in the Caribbean, since it does come primarily from Africa. But you can see on the right, you can see the stems, but this is, they wrap it in banana plant leaves to keep it fresh. So that's what the green is. They will wrap the cot leaves, roll it into a bigger leaf from a banana plant, and then, wind, string or leaf or, whatever that is around it to keep it tight, keep it fresh when it's being transported. Okay. So that was a lot of information, but again, we're looking at, what parents can do and learning to identify some of these substances, learning what they look like, learning how they're used, learning, kind of what behavior or mood might be exhibited when someone is using them is really important. So as always, we really appreciate you all coming to these webinars, because being informed really is one of our best tools. Also being curious. So things that parents can do, learn how to identify misuse and diversion of drugs to or from others. So, is our child maybe friends with someone who is selling their Adderall, something like that. How are these drugs being diverted out into the community, either shared or sold? Safely storing medications in a lockbox and monitoring usage. Medication safety as a whole, be sure that we're monitoring if our kids need medication or they're on prescriptions, that we're tracking that usage and we're keeping the medications out of reach, and disposing of all unused and expired medications in a drop box or other methods. And actually this Saturday is National Drug Take Back Day. So so St. Michael's, I know the Sheriff's Department will be in St. Michael's firehouse from 10 to 2, collecting any substances that people want to bring. And as always, you can use their drop box in Easton or the State Police drop box, or St. Michael's Police has just reopened their drop box, and Oxford as well. And as a little plug, I will be there on Saturday in St. Michael's at the firehouse offering Narcan training as well. So we hope that you all can come visit and pick up some information and drop off your unused medications. So again, this is what we're talking about. This is why we are so really grateful that people come to these webinars. Familiarize yourself with the facts about stimulants and other drugs. About a third of parents falsely believe that prescription stimulants can help improve academic performance, even if their child does not have ADHD. And that is just not the case. There isn't a medication, unfortunately, that we can give our children and they'll do better in school. These are medications that are very closely regulated and have to be, because young people identified with having ADHD, their brains are just not working in the same way, and they need medication to help them better focus and build up those dopamine levels. Familiarize yourself with all the illicit stimulants and their effects. Have conversations with your kids about the misuse, including stimulants and the harms it can bring. Encourage healthy study habits and achievements. Keep lines of communication open and fine-tune your observation skills. And again, we always say, look for patterns. So if your child has a day or two of being really, really moody, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're using substances. But if it seems to be a trend or a pattern, if friends change, if you find unusual things in their room, if you just find changes that are either happening kind of quickly or just don't seem at all like your child, those might be things to start, looking into, just, patterns of behavior and changes. Okay, I think that's it. We thank you so much for coming today. And I'll turn it back over to Madison.
Yeah, and just like Beth was mentioning earlier with the drug disposable options for Saturday, TCPS does have the Datira pouches that you can get from any school. You just call and ask. There are these, I wish I had a picture of them again. I showed them
I
last.
know, we had them last time.
Yeah, they're little pouches. What you do is drop your medication pill into that bag, put water in it, shake it for 30 seconds, and that pill is dissolved, gone. And you just throw it away. So it's super easy. It's at every TCPS school right now. So just call and ask. The nurse will meet you in the office and give you how many you want. So
and I
that's
think
a good easy option instead of going somewhere as well to dispose.
Exactly. And if you do go to dispose, like say you have medications you just really want to get out of the house right now, I believe that the sheriff's department will have people there, not just collecting the drugs, but also to hand out the Datira bags and some other materials. So we encourage you to come out if you happen to be around St. Michael's that day.
I'm gonna put my email in case you guys think of any questions or comments later, or you think of any, please email me if you think of any topics for webinars in the future. We would love to work together and get those going for you guys. All right, I don't see any questions. So thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming.